On Pesach, there's a lot of halachas we got to learn. And we got to know a lot of things to do, especially this year when Pesach falls out on Sunday. So Erev Pesach is Shabbos. There's plenty to know. But in addition to studying the halachas, Pesach is also about doing the work of Pesach. And that means undergoing a real transformation, an internal transformation. And this year, when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, so there's an extra transformation that we want to undergo. And it's actually very different to the average year. And the question is, well, what are we supposed to do in general, and what are we meant to do now? So what we want to do at this time of year is really, we're preparing for Pesach, we're getting rid of the chametz, and we're doing all the different preparations to go there. And we also want to be able to do the spiritual work, the halachas of transformation. Avodas Hashem. What is the service of God that's required at this time? And so we go back to a story in Gemara, which is told about the 1 year that Erev Pesach fell out to be on Shabbos, as it does this year. The Gemara in Pesachim tells a story. 1 year, Erev Pesach fell out on Shabbos. Now, actually, that means Pesach fell out on Shabbos, because we do Pesach, we call Pesach right from Motzei Shabbos. But Pesach is actually the Korban Pesach. So we stop eating chametz and everything already before. That's because you're meant to do the Korban Pesach already before. So Pesach begins on the night of the Seder. But actually, Korban Pesach is brought beforehand. And what they did was, well, imagine this, all the Jews in the world had to gather together. At least, okay, in Eretz Yisrael, but certainly, a lot of Jews had to gather. So imagine there's a few million people, right? Figure out, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40 people have to eat each lamb. So the Korban Pesach was a lamb, and you had to finish it and consume the entire thing before midnight. So you couldn't get too few people, and you couldn't get too many people. Who are you inviting to your Seder? God willing, Mashiach comes, and then we can eat a Korban Pesach this year too. We have to know these rules. You can't just have 400 people at your Seder and have one Korban Pesach, because then they're not going to get the minimum requirement of a kazayis to each person to eat. But you can't have too few people, because if it's just 3 of you at the Seder, there's no such thing as a Seder with 2-3 people, because how are you going to eat one whole lamb between all of you and consume and finish it by night? You're not allowed to leave anything over. Today we do an afikoyim on a piece of matzah. Doesn't work the same. They had a good juicy lamb, roast lamb. We can't eat roast at all, but they ate roast. So everything's ready, and you have to shecht the Korban Pesach. So to slaughter the Korban Pesach means you had a representative of each group of people. One representative would go to Yerushalayim and arrive by the Korban Pesach and eat it. And this guy is going in to represent. So let's say there's 30, 40 people in your group. He goes inside. He does the Korban Pesach. So the way it worked was, Pesach, Erev Pesach, that is, on Shabbos this year, in the afternoon, everyone would go together. So there's, let's say, a few 100,000 people. Too many for one group. So they would divide it up into 3 groups, because each group has to need space. They got to shech the Korban Pesach. They would do the Korban, and group number 1 would come in. They would close the doors of the Azara. Everyone would do all the shechting. They would walk outside. Then they would do group number 2, then group number 3. And when it was Shabbos, they all had to wait in the Harabais for Motzei Shabbos. Then they would go home and begin the Seder. The question was, when Pesach falls out on Erev Pesach, that is, on Shabbos, do you still offer the Korban Pesach or not? So maybe we should defer and not do a Korban Pesach this year. For example, you'll say, what do you mean, you won't do Korban Pesach? We don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, even though it says in the Torah to blow shofar, because you might come to carry. We don't take shekel lulav if Pesach falls out, if Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. There's many things we don't do when it's Shabbos. So maybe when it's Shabbos, Korban Pesach, we don't do Korban Pesach that year. How would you know? That was the question. And this question was raised by the members of the Sanhedrin, B'nai Beseira were the leaders of the Jewish people. They did not know the answer to the question. So everyone's racking their brain. What do we do? Thinking. Then they discovered that there was a Babylonian sage who had just come from Babylon, from Babel to the land of Israel. His name was, famously, Hillel. So they said to Hillel, we hear that you know the answer to the question. Hillel says, sure. Is there only one Korban Pesach that you offer a year? There's actually 200. And what he meant was, the Beis HaMikdash was very interesting. Because in the building of the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash, you actually were able to be Mechalel, you were not able to be Mechalel Shabbos. In fact, how do we know how to keep Shabbos? The 39 categories of work on Shabbos, we know them from what they didn't do in the Mishkan. That's in the building of the Mishkan. But once the Mishkan is built, well, they did a lot of things on Shabbos. And every Shabbos, they would do things which are really desecration of Shabbos, and it was permitted. So in the building you can't, but once it's already built, it's different. For example, in the Mishkan, they shechted every single Shabbos. You're not allowed to slaughter an animal on Shabbos. They did. Every Shabbos, like every day, they brought a korban tamid in the morning and a korban tamid in the afternoon. That's 2. And on Shabbos, there were 2 extras, because there was a korban musaf that they brought also. So Hillel says, listen, there's approximately 50 Shabbos a year, give or take. On each one of them, you have 2 korban tamid and 2 musaf. That's 4. 50 times 4 is 200. There's about 200 sacrifices that you offer on Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash. So why is Korban Pesach any different? He says, you know what, guys? You can do Korban Pesach also. It's fine. So he ruled, verdict. They said to Hillel, wow, you're so brilliant. We are officially appointing you as leader of the Jewish people. Nasi, prince, president of the Sanhedrin. And that began the dynasty of Hillel, with all the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliels and Rabban Gamliels and everyone who came from there. That was the moment when Hillel was chosen. And Hillel said to them, it's quite strange that I, a Babylonian, had to come here and figure this out for you. Why couldn't you guys come up with a solution on your own? And it is interesting. It's very interesting. Because, Jews were celebrating Pesach for many, many years before this moment, for centuries. Now, it's true, it's a very rare occurrence that Pesach falls out on Sunday, the Erev Pesach is Shabbos. It's very rare. The last time it happened was a mere 3 years ago, but the next time is in about 20 years. So, savor the moment. It's going to take a long time till it happens again. But still, it happens a lot. Over the course of 1,000 years, surely it happened many, many times. Question is, why is this big, major dilemma arising in the days of B'nai Beseira and Hillel? What should we do? Should we offer the Korban Pesach or not? Why don't you just figure out what they did till now? Remember, there were halachas, let's say, when Pinchas killed Zimri. Remember that story? So Zimri was having relations with Cosby, who wasn't Jewish. And they had a whole thing between them. What did he do? Pinchas goes over to Moshe and he says, what do you mean? The halacha is to kill him in the moment. Why did nobody remember? I mean, that makes sense, because it wasn't something that was common. How are you supposed to know? But when something is on the calendar, it's an event on the calendar, that when Pesach falls out on Sunday, do you offer the Korban Pesach or not? Why do you even have a question? Go look, what did you do last time? It should be very simple to answer. So the Gemara in Yerushalmi, which brings the story, Yerushalmi answers, true, it was just a miracle. It was a miracle because Hashem wanted Hillel to become the leader of the Jewish people, and that's why he made a miracle. Right? But very, very difficult. Because, it should have been such a simple thing. Do you or do you not? Remember, the first year, when they left Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, what day of the week was Korban Pesach? Torah was given on a Shabbos. Therefore, you begin counting the Omer 49 days before. So that means the first day of Pesach would have been a Friday. But of course, they added one extra day, so it was actually Thursday. And that means that the Korban Pesach was the day before, which was Wednesday. Which means 4 days earlier, on the 10th of Nisan, they tied the lamb to the bed. Remember that? In the first year? But tying the lamb to the bed, you could probably do without desecrating Shabbos. You can't touch an animal on Shabbos, but it's only rabbinic. But there's ways and means to tie a lamb to a bed without doing anything that desecrates Shabbos. There is no way to slaughter a Korban Pesach without desecrating Shabbos. But the following year, what day was Pesach? The following year, Pesach actually fell out on Shabbos. The Korban Pesach was on Shabbos. How do we know that? Because it says the Nasiim, right? Each Nasi offered a different, each one of the princes of the tribes offered a different korban on that day. And what it says is that Sunday was the first one. The first day of the week was the first one. That means the seventh day of the week was the 7th. The 13th day was Thursday. The 14th day would have been, the 13th day would have been Friday, sorry. The 14th day would have been Shabbos. And that means that when was the Korban Pesach offered? Shabbos. So there you go. Torah, that was a very eventful year, right? Torah was given right before. The first time they did the Korban Pesach after Torah was given, Pesach, the Korban Pesach was on Shabbos. Go back to that moment and say, did they do it or did they not do it? Some want to say that they forgot, because there was a 70-year exile. So they couldn't remember. Different answers given about why they couldn't remember. But it's just very difficult to accept that in the whole Jewish people, nobody remembered anything about what happened last time. True, most people are very forgetful from one year to the next. But it's just hard to say that nobody actually knew over all the years what happened. The tzlach is the tziyun the nefesh chaya. The Rav of Prague, the Noida Yehuda. He says that, you know what happened? The question wasn't whether we should offer Korban Pesach or not. Everybody knew you do offer Korban Pesach. The question was whether we should change the calendar. Should we change the calendar or not? In other words, they were controlling the calendar, right? So you decide when Rosh Chodesh is. So in many ways, you could play with the calendar. So is there a point to play with the calendar to make it that Pesach should not fall out on Sunday and Erev Pesach on Shabbos? So you shouldn't have this issue. If it does, okay, no question. But should we play with it or not? So those are some of the answers that are given. But very difficult to say that they didn't know that either. Did you or did you not do it last time? So we need some kind of understanding of it, a simple answer as to what was it that they couldn't remember. There was once, they say about a shul. There was an ancient shul that was there for already over 150 years. And they had certain customs in the shul. They always kept the custom. So one day, the members of the shul had a question. They couldn't understand, what do you do? What's our custom in the shul? On Yom Kippur, by Kaddish. When you say Kaddish, do you stand up? Or do we sit down? So came Yom Kippur, and the guys are having an argument on Yom Kippur. Should we stand up or should we sit down? Yes, no, yes, no. Some say yes, some say no. And half the shul is getting up and having a conversation. What do we do? And these guys are saying yes, these guys are saying no. And as shuls happen, when there's different customs, it became very, very rowdy and a big mess. Yes or no, what do we do? Finally, they decided there's an elder in the shul. He must know what to do. So they went over to him. He's sitting in the corner, minding his own business. And they said, what do we do? Do we get up or not? And the two groups are coming in, fighting, and there's this war. He said, I don't remember. Finally, he sees this massive war going on, and he says, now I remember the custom. The custom in the shul is that we have a big war and a big fight every time about whether or not we should do this, and that's what we do every single time. That's how we operate over here. And that essentially is the answer to this question. The answer to this question: should you offer a Korban Pesach when Pesach falls out on Sunday and you're offering the Korban on Shabbos? The answer is it was meant to be placed in question. Now I'll show you some examples of that, right? You know that when you put on tefillin, there's a whole argument which tefillin you put on. Rashi said one way, Rabbeinu Tam said another way. Those are the two most well-known ones. There are others. It's 4 pairs of tefillin. But Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam had a big argument, which one do you put on? So the question is, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam did that about 1,000 years ago. Just go back a little longer than that. Which tefillin did Moshe Rabbeinu put on? Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam. How could Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam have an argument which tefillin you put on? Surely you knew from before which tefillin you put on. In other words, these are not questions that arose at some point. These are questions that should have been known for many generations. So what does it mean that they didn't know which one you put on? There's an argument of Shammai and Hillel about putting on tzitzis. Not so well known. What did they do? Did you do it before or did you not? There's a big argument about how you blow shofar. Torah says you blow tekiah, trua, tekiah. So how do you blow a trua? Some say you go doo, doo, doo. And some say you go doo, 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 doo. And some say you do both. So what do? All three. But what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? What did they do all the generations? Did they offer it or not? Did they do it this way or that way? And the answer to this question is that what they used to do was it was unclear in the first place what to do. Which means it was certain halachas were meant to be left unclear. And that's the way they were designed. So it was designed to not be clear and to have an argument every time about whether you should offer a Korban Pesach or not. And this leads us into a fascinating understanding of a deep sugya, a deep argument in the Shas.
Are Korbanos brought every day in the Beis HaMikdash, including Shabbos?
Korbanos are brought every day. That's what Hillel said. Hillel told them, you offer the Korban every day. Every Shabbos, that is. So why not? That's what Hillel said. And Bnei B'Yisrael like, oh, that's brilliant. And you're like, that is brilliant, but why couldn't you figure it out yourself? Obviously. So what exactly was the argument? Somehow, there are two ways to look at this question of whether you should offer a Korban Pesach or not. And both ways are true. And every time the question comes about, you, the Sanhedrin of that time, need to adjudicate that question. What is the question? Here's the question. When you say you offer Korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos, it's not totally true. You offer some Korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos. There are two types of Korbanos. We'll categorize them into Korban Tzibur and Korban Yochid. They are communal sacrifices and they are personal sacrifices. So, for example, every day in the Beis HaMikdash was a Korban Tamid. What's a Korban Tamid? It's owned by the community. In fact, every year, around this time of year, they would pay machzis a shekel. We do it before Purim. They would pay half shekel, and one of the purposes was to buy korbanos. So all Jews should have a portion in the korban. So some korbanos are offered by everybody. Those korbanos are indeed offered on Shabbos. But if I'm a private individual and I want to bring a korban to the Beis HaMikdash, I want to bring a korban of, toida. I want to say thank you for something. I did something wrong. I want to bring korban achatas, korban osham. Korban adav, I want to just make a donation. You're not allowed to make a private, personal korban on Shabbos. Here's the question. Is the Korban Pesach a personal korban? A personal sacrifice, or is it a communal sacrifice? Is it? What is it? It's a very ambiguous sacrifice. Here's why. Korban Pesach has all the factors, all the elements of a personal sacrifice, and also of a public sacrifice. For example, the first year, that was the most defining year of the Korban Pesach. That was the year they lived in Mitzrayim. Moshe told them, Hashem said, everyone's going to bring a Korban Pesach. How do you bring it? Each Jew went to his own private home. And in his private home, he tied the lamb to the bed, and then he slaughtered the lamb. He shechted it. And then he did his own thing. Sprinkled the blood, put the blood on the doorpost, remember that? And he offered the Korban Pesach. So me as an individual, me and my family have nothing to do with you and your family. True, everyone's doing it at the same time, but everyone's offering a personal korban on their own. The following year, it flipped into a communal situation. Because the following year, they already had Matan Torah and the Mishkan. So now they had a special place they brought it, and they couldn't just slaughter it in their own homes, they shechted it in the Mishkan, in the Azar. And you had to come in there together, and everyone together does the work, in 3 groups, as we said, and now they make a communal thing. And from then on, every single year, when they had a Beis HaMikdash, how did you offer the Korban Pesach? It was a communal korban in the sense you had to come to the Azara and you had to have everyone together. You couldn't do it in the privacy of your own home. But then, unlike every other korban which was brought on the Mizbeach, this one you didn't. You took it home and you ate it with your family. There's the question. Is it a personal, your own korban, or is it a public communal korban? If it's communal, then you can bring it on Shabbos. If it's personal, you cannot offer it on Shabbos. And there's the question. What is the Korban Pesach? Every single time that Pesach fell out on Sunday and Erev Pesach on Shabbos, the Sanhedrin had to decide this question. It was always left ambiguous. And even nowadays, when we don't have a korban, unless Mashiach comes, hopefully, the question to us is the Korban Pesach public or is it personal? And that's the question we're going to see. Now let's understand how we get to this and what the logic is. Okay? Again. So our question is, let's just summarize what we're holding. Our question is, there's this argument going on between Bnei Beseira and Hillel. Bnei Beseira say, we don't know what to do. Hillel says, you know what? The rule is, we offer the Korban Pesach, it's considered a communal korban. And we asked, what do you mean? You didn't know about it before? The answer is, it was a question of whether it's personal or communal. And that question has to be adjudicated each time. Now let's understand how we get to this. Years later, because Hillel was the beginning of the Tanaic period, the Tanoim of the Mishnah. Years later, many generations, you had the Amoraim. Two Amoraim have the same exact argument. Who are they? Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan. They have an argument. What's the argument? Should we offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos or not? Same argument. Rabbi Yeshaya says, yes, you should. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, you should not. Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan have many arguments through Shas. And if you pay attention to the arguments through Shas, I'll give you a few examples now. Ready to learn some Gemara? Deep into Gemara? Well, okay, just surface level Gemara. So if you pay attention, you'll see, Gemara is designed in what's called Leshitatam. The system of Gemara, right? How does Gemara work? The idea of Gemara is this, is that it's about taking ideas and untangling them. Which means being able to find one thread that runs through the whole question. So Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan have an argument in one place. We want to take a look at every time they argue, and we want to find one thread that runs through. Rabbi Yeshaya holds this, and Rabbi Yonatan holds that. It's called Leshitatam. And then we want to have to find each one why you need to have the arguments in each case, okay? So again, if I look at Hillel and Bnei Beseira, I don't know what the defining source of the argument is. But as we'll see, when you look at Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan, you understand the argument is whether it's personal or communal. Which one is it? Here's a few examples. So Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan have an argument as follows. They say, what's the din? What's the halacha? You know what Ir Nidachas is? Ir Nidachas. Got to learn some Torah over here. Ir Nidachas means a city that sins and does and serves idols. So the din is the whole city gets burned down. And instead of judging them personally, you judge them in a community. So the question is, how many people have to be living in the city? Rabbi Yeshaya says, if it's less than 10 people, it's not a community. Has to be more than 10 people, but less than 100. If it's more than 100, it's already beyond. 10 to 100 is no longer individuals, it's a community. Rabbi Yonatan says, I disagree. 10 to 100 is individuals. Over 100, that's a community. See the argument? Do we take the individuals between 10 and 100 and make them into a community, according to Rabbi Yeshaya? Put them together? Or Rabbi Yonatan says each one's an individual on his own. The Torah says, Ish imo ve'aviv tirau. So by default, what does it mean? Ish sheyekalel et aviv ve'it imo. If a man et aviv ve'imo mot yumat. If a man curses his father and mother, he dies. So what would be if a man curses his father and not his mother, or his mother and not his father? Should he die? So Torah says, aviv ve'imo. You got to curse both. The din is, nope. Rabbi Yeshaya says, I mean, they argue. Rabbi Yeshaya says it's only if you curse both your father and the mother by default. Rabbi Yonatan says no, either the father or the mother. Rabbi Yeshaya looks at everything together. Rabbi Yonatan says each individual on his own. You guys with me so far? Go a couple more. Here's another argument. The question is, on Yom Kippur, you offer two sacrifices. One is a bull and the other one is a goat. Should you mix the blood together or put each one separately? Rabbi Yonatan says separately. Rabbi Yeshaya says together. Rabbi Yeshaya has everything to look at them together. Here's another one. You ever done Torah math? You know, nowadays in Eretz Yisrael, they're trying to get, also here, they're trying to get secular studies to be studied by all these yeshivas. Some yeshivas are buying it, some are not, and some are taking an approach that will do math through Torah. In other words, they're showing all the mathematical sides that you do in Torah. Here's how Torah does math. How much is 1/5? Mathematically, how much is 1/5? 20%. I can show you that 1/5 is actually not 20%, but 25%. You would say, how much is 25%? It's a quarter, right? Nope. 25% is actually a fifth. Why? No. Some Gemara learning. It's an argument of Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Yonatan says 20% is a fifth. Rabbi Yeshaya says 25% is a fifth. Why? Come on. Gemara cop. Because if I say, take the principal and a fifth. So the principal is 100%. And then a fifth is, well, if a fifth is 20, then you have 120. So, 1 second. The 25% is a fifth of 100 plus 25. Because if I give you 25%, that's a fifth. And you put 100 with it, that's 125. So 25% is 20% of 125. You get it? So Rabbi Yeshaya says, if you want a fifth, 20%, it's 25%. Because the principal and the fifth become a community. They go together. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, it's 100%. Take the fifth of that, is 20%, and put that separate, it's 120. There's the argument. Every time they argue, the question is, do you put things together or do you separate them? Do I look at all as one entity or not? You know, last one. Egla Arufa, it says if someone was killed, found found dead, a corpse was found dead. So you have to take an Egla Arufa and you have to put it in a river that will never be worked. So Rabbi Yeshaya says, it means a river that was never worked and will never be worked in. Rabbi Yonatan says only the future, because Rabbi Yeshaya says look at everything as one entity, the past and the present and the future. And Rabbi Yonatan says each one on its own. So here's the primary thrust of what we're saying. Every time Rabbi Yeshaya and Rabbi Yonatan argue in Shas, it's one thing. What are they arguing about? Rabbi Yeshaya says community, Rabbi Yonatan says individual. And that's why that same argument applies in Korban Pesach. What's the argument of Yeshai and Rabbi Yonatan? The question is, which one dominates? Do we say that when you offer a Korban Pesach, even though each individual is offering it, but because you're offering the Azor and there's one element of communal, therefore it's a communal Korban, therefore you can bring it on Shabbos, Rabbi Yeshaya. Or, nope, it's each individual one, therefore it's an individual Korban and you can't bring it on Shabbos, it's actually its own separate thing. So here's our question on Bnei Beseir and Hillel. Someone had to come and to adjudicate that time that it's going to be communal. Enter Hillel. How do you decide? Is Korban Pesach something you do community or individual? Now I want to take this to a level of our understanding. What does that mean? This is the moment, remember, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people are given is essentially Korban Pesach. Hashem tells them, Rosh Chodashim, right? Which means that the new month. And then he says, celebrate the Pesach and offer the Korban Pesach. Every one of us wants to build a relationship with Hashem. When you want to build a relationship with Hashem, the first order of the day is to offer a Korban Pesach. What's Korban Pesach? It means to let go of everything you ever believed in and to jump out of yourself, to pass over anything you believe in, and to get into a relationship with Hashem, which is why the Korban Pesach was the God of the Egyptians. They had to tie it to the bed and they had to let go and give it over to Hashem. And every year, you want to let go of everything you believe in and let it go and give it over to Hashem. But sometimes we are a Klal Yisrael, and sometimes we are a Reb Yisrael, a personal individual. Are we talking about the community, or are we talking about the individuals? That's the issue. What is the dominant feature over here, the community or the individual? So when you want to get close to Hashem, if you say the Jewish people are getting close to Hashem, I get it. But what about the one single solitary individual? Which means, the Jewish people are we're in a very interesting spot right now with this whole thing going on with October 7 and everything in the world. But all of us believe, right? You have no question about it. The Jewish people are going to be here forever. No, not much of a question. I don't know how, I don't know what, and it's very difficult, but we are going to be here forever. Don't worry, Hashem will not forsake us. But what about me as an individual? What's with me? Can I be sure of Hashem's love? Can I jump over all my limitations again to a relationship with Hashem? Or can I say, maybe Hashem has it out for me? Maybe not. Who says I get what I want? Who says I get to experience Hashem's love? The question when Korban Pesach falls out on Shabbos is it a community or am I an individual? When I offer my Korban Pesach, can I look at myself with the same power as a community? When I'm building my relationship with Hashem, can I have the same power as the Jewish people for me as an individual? There was one other case that happened. I mentioned earlier that the Nisim, when they inaugurated the Mishkan the first year, each one of the Nisim offered a Korban every day. So the Medrash tells us something fascinating. So day one was Shevet Yehuda, right? Remember this, the Korbanos every day? Familiar? Every day, during the month of Nisan, the first 12 days, we don't say Tachnun the whole month. Why not? Because the first 12 days, they were offering, the Nasim offering Korbanos. Then you have Pesach, once as the majority of the month it's going out without saying Tachnun. The whole month we don't say Tachnun. But the first 12 days, 13 days, actually, we say the Nasi. Every Nasi, when they inaugurated the Mishkan, Hashem gave us a Torah, we built the Mishkan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Mishkan was done. They had the 8 days of preparation, of inaugurating, and then every Nasi brought a Korban at the inauguration. So, and they brought identical Korbanos, by the way. So day one was Yehuda, but day 7 was Ephraim. What day of the week was day 7? We said earlier, remember? Day 1 was Sunday. Day 7 was, Shabbos. So now the question was, Shevet Ephraim was number 7. He's like, can I bring a Korban or not? Am I considered a community or am I considered a private individual? So you might argue that maybe I'm representing a tribe, but let's go with the whole thrust of understanding that no, each one of them was actually an individual. So the Medrash Rabbah tells us that Shevet Ephraim didn't know what to do. Some say, by the way, that it says they brought the Korban on the 7th day, they delayed it for the next day. And there were 2 people who brought the Korban the next day. The Medrash says, Shevet Ephraim was granted a special permission by Hashem. Hashem says, I gave Shabbos, I gave you the right to do it. And you can offer the Korban even on Shabbos. Then the Medrash adds and says, you know why Shevet Ephraim was allowed to bring an individual Korban on Shabbos? Because the father of Shevet Ephraim was Yosef. Yosef kept Shabbos. When the brothers came to visit him, he was before the Torah was given, right? Yosef kept Shabbos. It says, he prepared a meal for them. Medrash says it was Shabbos, and he invited them to his meal of Shabbos. Hashem says, because you kept Shabbos, therefore what? Therefore, your grandson, Elishama ben Ammiud from the tribe of Ephraim, gets to desecrate Shabbos and offer a Korban? That doesn't make any sense. Here's what it means. If you're an individual, we said, are you let off on Shabbos? No. But if you are a community and a communal person, like a community, then you could offer on Shabbos. Yosef had something very unique and special about him. You know, Yosef was faced with the greatest challenge of all time. The challenge was, he was a slave, and he was seduced by his master's wife. And she came over to him, and the Medrash says she was really working herself hard. She changed clothing every morning and evening. She made herself very, very, very desirable by him. Now, Yosef had no community to fall back on. Nothing. Zero. Can you imagine how difficult that is? He had most of what keeps us going, right? It's one of the hardest things in life. When I see this all the time, it's so difficult, right? We Jews are communal people. When Yom Tov comes along and a person is on his own, I think it's one of the most hardest things in the world. Yom Tov could be the worst time when a person is alone. It is. It's the harshest, most difficult period to someone who's alone. And it's very difficult to find community because we're all communal based. That's the reality. But you want to know about loneliness? The loneliest person in the world was Yosef. He was genuinely alone. We today struggle with loneliness. I met this, we did an event last week in Muncie for all the educators. We invited them to hear about single parent kids. It was beautiful to see how many come out. It was really special. So I was talking to a therapist over there, a very prominent therapist, and he came in to hear. I asked him, I said, what would you say is the biggest challenge people face nowadays? Like when they come over to you for therapy, what's the biggest challenge? You know what he said? Loneliness. And I was like, why? He says, I'll give you one reason, because today we need to understand everything. Because we're in a scientifically minded generation, we think. So therefore, when something happens, we explain why it happened. Oh, even religiously. Oh, this person did something wrong. Oh, that's why they deserved it. But then you have nothing more to say, because the person was a good person, like a mother and two kids just walking across the street. And like, oh, they must have been going through red. Nope, they weren't. Everything was fine. What did they do wrong? Nothing. And then you're dwarfed by the majesty, if you will, of Hashem. Hashem controls things, and you're absolutely helpless. It's the enormity of the divine and the smallness of man. And when we don't have answers to our problems, we feel all alone. And when we find ourselves in impossible situations, we don't know how to grip and hold on to Hashem's power. Because I feel like an individual, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to connect. Well, look at Yosef. What did Yosef do? All alone. No community to judge him. Sometimes at least, okay, I'll be judged by the community. That'll keep me going. Nobody to judge him. Nobody to fall back on. No family. No mother. She wasn't alive. His father wasn't around, and his brothers had given him up. And his God had failed him. So what's left? Nothing. What did Yosef do? He actually was about to fall. He was about to sin. And that's because he saw himself as an individual and he was alone. What happens? It's fascinating what happened. Yosef goes to his father and he saw his father's image. Near Asala Dumus the Yeknishal Aviv. So the Medrash says that Yaakov was in the image of Adam Arishon, Adam. Adam was a single solitary individual, and he ate of the tree of knowledge. He did an act because he was all alone. He didn't know the repercussions, didn't understand, and he messed up. We are all struggling with that mess up of one man, who was the first man ever. And his father's image appeared to him, and the message was, you know why Adam was created alone? I'm here to tell you that you're not alone. That every act that you do is communal, affects the entire world. And when Yosef saw that, he flipped his whole thinking. He internalized the power of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people. And so it wasn't about me and my feelings right now with this woman, but rather it was generations. She had the power to destroy his life, and she very much exerted that power. She destroyed his life. She messed him up. He found himself in a dungeon afterwards for 12 years as a result of that. Where did his power draw from? It's not me. It's me as Hashem's representative, as the community. And as a result of that, Yosef transformed everything. Proof in the pudding is, we're here a few thousand years later telling the story of what happened with Yosef. A personal guy in a personal moment. We're telling the story. You know why? Because it was all a glory of one man who wasn't one man. He was a community. Hashem said, oh, you come from Yosef? Ephraim, you come from Yosef, so your son Elishama ben Amiud can absolutely offer the sacrifice on Shabbos. Why? Because when you're a community, the community has the power. Which means communal power is the ability to realize you're not on your own. You represent the entire Jewish people. Imagine you could realize every single time, when something happens in your life, when you're facing a small addiction yourself, when you're facing that loneliness and you're facing a challenge and a difficulty and you're about to fall, to internalize the message of Yosef, that you're not an individual, you're actually communal. You represent the entire community. That's what happened with the story of Bnei Beseira and Hillel also. The question was, should we offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos? Enter a man by the name of Hillel. Who was Hillel? He was an individual. Hillel says, and we do it in Pirkei Avos right after Pesach, he says like this. He was talking about the Korban Pesach saga. Imei nani mili, uchshani le'atzmi mani. If I am not for myself, if I'm not an individual, who am I? I must see myself as an individual. Korban Pesach is something you offer as an individual. Every person has to do his work. You cannot say, I rely on the community. You cannot fall back on other people doing the work for you. You're on your own. You are alone. But if you think the loneliness, if you think alone means lonely, it doesn't. Hashem is also alone. And he continues, if I am for myself, what am I? I have to be in myself, but I have to be a community. Because in order for me to offer the Korban Pesach, I have to realize it's Hashem doing the work, but he's doing it through me. I'm a community. And then he ends off, Ve'im lo achshav eimatai. If not now, then when? If I don't offer the Korban Pesach now, when will I be able to do it? Hillel was the one who said, Hillel was known as the most modest person ever. When Hillel died, they said modesty has died. He believed he was totally one person who didn't even think of himself. And yet Hillel is the man who said, Imanikan hakol kan. If I'm here, everything is here. This is the power of an individual to realize, I'm not alone. I am a representative of Hashem. And when the Jewish people begin this process of offering a Korban Pesach, this is the question that gets asked. You wish the question will be adjudicated once and for all. You wish you could just say, okay, so we're going to solve the problem, but no. Every individual throughout history faces the challenge. I think we today face it more than ever. In a generation where you could have 1 million likes and 0 love. That's hard. The whole world knows about you, and yet you're inside crying for attention and crying for love. But every time Pesach falls out on Shabbos, we have to ask ourselves a question. We want to offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos. Should we or shouldn't we? Well, Hillel already told us, and Hillel ruled for all generations, that you must offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos. So now we know the Psak Halacha, the verdict is we are going to offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos. God willing, Mashiach will come, we'll actually offer it. But we offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos, but in order to do that, we have to do the work of getting to that space. What is the work? The work is to recognize it's not me being an individual. Oh yes, I must do the work myself. I am an individual, but it's not me. All the work is Hashem. Hashem is doing the work. When I grew up, I grew up in South Africa. My parents still living in the same house, actually. Well, I should say they moved there when I was bar mitzvah, but across the street from us, diagonally across the street in Johannesburg, lived a Jew by the name of Rabbi Lappin. And I don't know about this, but he ran a shul. When I turned bar mitzvah, I was given a job of laning in the shul on Shabbos. Very privileged. And it was a very Litvish shul. And he was a very prominent Litvish Rav. So now most South African shuls were just, were not religious shuls. They were Litvish, but not religious. This one was a very religious yeshivish shul. And he was a chashuv guy. Anyway, he tells a story. You can watch the video. He once went over to, he didn't want to, in South Africa, it's the interesting thing. You get kind of like, anyway, but in South Africa for sure, you get controlled by your shul. Shuls have a board, and the rabbi works for the board. So he was like, I'm not doing that. I refuse to be intellectually owned by other people. So he didn't want the money to come from them, opened up a business. Now the question was, too many full-time jobs. He's like, I have a full-time job of running a shul. That's a full-time job. I have a full-time of a community. I have a full-time job of the business that I was doing. And I have a full-time job of being a family man, a father, and a husband. And I was also full-time. 1976, I came to New York. He says, I heard that there's a very wise man, and I decided, you know what? I'm not a chassid, but I'm going to go meet him. So I came in to meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn, New York. When I arrived, they tell me that, we'll give you an appointment in 10 months' time. I begged and I pleaded, I'm a man of community, and finally I wrote a letter into the Rebbe himself, and I got a response from the Rebbe, no problem, I got a night, the next night to come in. Appointment was whatever, 2 o'clock in the morning, that's when usually appointments happened, and I was given my time. I walked in, and the Rebbe told me to sit down. Now this is how you know he's not a chassid, because, if you're a chassid, when the Rebbe says sit down, you don't sit down. He's like, sat down. And the Rebbe started speaking for 15 minutes, and I realized it was going to be a real conversation. It was a 15-minute conversation. That's a big conversation, 15 minutes. And I presented my dilemma. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. This is my issue. I work too many jobs. I can't do it. Should I give it up? The Rebbe said, no, you shouldn't. And he was pushing me to stay. He's I'm a young guy. I blurted out, perhaps not with such kavod as I should have. And I said, Rebbe, you're demanding too much of me. I cannot do it. It's not possible. You can't run too many jobs on yourself, by yourself. So the Rebbe looks at me and he says, let me tell you something, my friends. Listen here. The problem is you're looking at human interaction as a chemical reaction. Chemical reaction means take one chemical, another chemical, put them together, and you get a compound. Human reactions are not a chemical reaction. You know what they are? Human reactions are much more like nuclear reactions. In a nuclear reaction, what happens is, a nuclear reaction occurs at its core, and then it radiates in a spherical way rather than a linear way. So at the outer rings of the sphere, you get bigger, 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 bigger. And what that means is, when you touch one person, your sphere grows and grows and gets bigger and bigger, and there's no limit. When you touch the heart of one person, you have a nuclear reaction. So it's not one person you're touching, but that person goes and impacts many, many people over. You know how it is when you walk in and you feel a feeling. Did you notice? It's unbelievable to see. It'll actually affect 3 people away from you at least. If you're home, and you come home and you're angry, that anger will spread to your spouse and your kids, will go over right away to the school, to a friend or a sibling of theirs, and go over and then affect that other guy. When he comes home, he's going to be angry. It has a massive effect. So one person's anger can go and affect 150 people out there, and they affect others. You walk in and you're feeling good. Your good feeling spreads all over. Feeling spread. You have the power. I walked out of there and I realized that I can have multiple full-time jobs because I'm filling up nuclear power. I'm expanding what I have all around. And such is my power. And when I teach 50 people, I'm not teaching 50, I'm teaching 150. And those 150 in turn have a compounded effect. And the algorithm spreads all around. When you look at yourself as an individual, then indeed, you're an individual. An individual is limited in his power, very limited in what he can do. But when a person stops looking at himself as an individual and rather views himself as a communal individual, a communal person, and starts realizing that, that's when it works. So here's the message. It's not about, oh, you're a community. Okay, got it? Yeah, now you got it. No. The question that comes up every time means it requires a total jump, a total Pesach, complete overhaul of our thinking. Ask yourself the question, what makes me today feel lonely? What makes me today feel like I'm all on my own and I'm powerless? And accept it. Because you're supposed to bring the Korban Pesach in the privacy of your own home and as an individual. And once you recognize, yes, Hashem wants me, the individual, to offer the Korban Pesach. Yes, what are your challenges? What are your difficulties? Accept them. And then, like Yosef, look back. And like Hillel, say, if Hashem gave me these challenges, Hashem believes in me. And when I get excited and thrilled, like Yosef, on his own, all alone, and get thrilled that it matters to Hashem, I make a difference to Hashem just like the Jewish people. Because the Torah is comprised of 600,000 letters, and if one letter is scratched and missing in any way, the entire Torah is possible. And when I can accept that each individual, me as an individual, I'm unique and I'm special in Hashem's eyes, just like the entire Klal Yisrael. You know what happens to you? When you start looking at yourself, you'll feel different. And when you start looking at every Jewish child out there and every Jew out there, instead of seeing a number, what will you see? It's not a statistic. It's a Jew. And when you see a Jew, you're able to make a transformation, a nuclear transformation in that person's life. What it requires is someone to paskin, like Hillel. Not just to say it, to actually work it into our life at a time like this. I want to offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos. I need to be able to say that, if I'm here, I make a difference to Hashem. My life, my being is critical to Hashem. And just like Yosef, the Torah is being written about that moment, Hashem is writing the whole Torah around me and around what's going on in my life. And when I see myself in that light, it's magnified many times over. Now I can offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos. Now I can walk around the world, touching every single individual at the core of their heart, making a deep, internal, true transformation in myself. Because if I believe in me, in the power of me, that God invested in me, then I can look at other people and I'm actually able to express the power to them. And then we can all offer the Korban Pesach on Shabbos in Yerushalayim.